When I was just 1 month old. My 3-year-old childhood friend pointed at me with disgust written all over her face. Then calmly told my father that this baby brother was so ugly. He'd probably never find a wife when he grew up, so she'd be kind enough to take him herself. From that day on, our two families arranged an engagement for us. But I never expected that she'd grow up to become the most jealously possessive girl I'd ever known. Just because I said one thing, she imperiously shoved candy into my mouth. "Ethan, eat this. When you're done, then you can answer me." Not holding my hand. That was wrong, wasn't it? I pointed toward the male lead standing nearby, who was clutching a bouquet of roses, about to confess his feelings to her. I said to Wendy, "So his flowers are just going to waste?" Wendy glanced over at the guy who was about to intrude on our private moment, smiled, and took the bouquet of roses from his hands. Witnessing this scene, every student in the school stood frozen in shock. The most beautiful girl in school, Wendy. Could it be that on his very first day, transfer student Julian had already won her over? But I just laughed, because I knew that whenever a smile appeared on Wendy's face, her tenderness toward me was actually a warning sign that she was about to transform into her jealous alter ego. Julian's first week at school, he became a celebrity on campus, because he beat me by exactly 1 point, surpassing me, the one who'd held the top spot for years. I looked down at my test papers, which added up to 740 points, then lifted my head and took a sip of water. I don't know why, but Julian seemed from start to finish to carry some kind of hostility toward me. He walked up to my desk, sneering. "Before I came here, I heard the top-ranked student in Harbor City was some kind of legend. Turns out he's nothing special. Really. There's no comparing a chicken's head to a phoenix's tail." Chicken's head and phoenix's tail? I looked at my 740 score and couldn't quite agree. Of course, Julian's humiliation of me didn't continue, because he'd just spotted the person standing at the classroom door, waiting for me after class, Wendy. His eyes lit up instantly. Wendy stood straight at the classroom entrance, calling out to me, "Bookworm, let's go home." Wendy was my childhood sweetheart. We'd grown up together since we were in diapers. My grades were always ranked second in our class, while she almost always ranked first, because I was obsessed with studying. Even when I was with her, 9 times out of 10 I was absorbed in physics formulas. That's why she always called me a bookworm. Of course I knew perfectly well that when those 3 words rolled off her tongue, her eyes were always filled with affection. Afterward she'd lose control, pin me against the wall, and say, "Good student. If you gave me even a fraction of the passion you give to studying, I could go crazy for you." Now a Julian who was stronger than me had appeared. And Julian had set his sights on Wendy from the very start. Julian confidently walked up to Wendy. "Wendy, let me tutor you, okay?" Wendy looked at him with mild surprise. Julian pointed to himself and said, "I'm the one they just praised over the loudspeaker. Ranked second in the grade. You trust I've got the skills, right?" Hearing this, Wendy lifted her eyes to look at me. That gaze seemed to hold understanding, mixed with a hint of mockery. Wendy was laughing at how useless I'd become. I turned away coldly, not wanting to look, but my eyes couldn't help but glance over. Wendy lowered her gaze, speaking to Julian with a gentleness so extreme. Julian smiled confidently at Wendy, showing his canine teeth, his eyes sparkling with expectation. My deskmate beside me couldn't help but whisper to me, "Did Wendy just agree? Isn't she your childhood sweetheart? I used to think you two might actually end up together. This Julian is smart, charming, and gets everything so easily." The person sitting behind me chimed in, "But you can't deny. The two of them really are a perfect match. Both talented and attractive. It gives you the feeling they were born to be a couple." How naive. I propped my chin up and laughed. They had no idea what Wendy was really like. Wendy's calculated gentleness just now, it appeared every time she helped me deal with obstacles in my path, always showed up. It looked pure, innocent, and polite. But really it was just her favorite game. Wendy was the wildest guard dog at my side. Her mission was to protect me. "Julian, I admit you're strong. But if Wendy's heart belongs only to me, then this conquest you think is so clever. What are your chances of winning? That's right, Julian was a conqueror. His goal was to conquer Wendy, the female lead. To collect love points. When the love points reached 100%, this story would be considered his success. In the original story, I was the villainous second male lead, Wendy's childhood friend. After Julian appeared, I would do things so terrible that people couldn't understand them. Of course, that was the original story's outline. But the original story stopped updating right when Julian appeared. When I awakened, that was when this entire story would completely reverse because of me. It's actually kind of funny. Before Julian came, I didn't love Wendy. All I cared about was studying. Which is why Wendy and I had never become a couple. Back then I deliberately said, the main task of high school students is studying. Let's wait until we get into the same university. Then we can date, okay? The book described me as someone bitter and harsh, ranked second in the grade, looking down on Wendy's careless and reckless nature. With personality problems. And also abandoning her because of her family background. That's why I became the white moonlight in Wendy's heart. Making Wendy always remember me. After the male lead arrived, I felt threatened. So I desperately pursued Wendy. Then I discovered that Wendy had been healed by the male lead. What was written in the book was true. I didn't like Wendy that much. That's why I was curious. Why did I become so obsessed? After the male lead arrived? When clearly before, all I cared about was studying. But that was just the plot in the book. I didn't believe Wendy would fall for this guy. Wendy was crazy. And so was I. Julian, was he ready to take on two crazy people? The next day, Julian approached me with a smirk and a curious expression. His lips curving up suggestively. Yesterday Wendy told me, I'm like the sun. She's practically falling for me. Because she feels I've lit up her life. I'd advise you, if you know what's good for you, back off now. I looked at him with an indescribable expression. Julian was actually pretty good looking. Arrogant and proud. He really did look like a little sun. But Wendy hated sunlight most of all. Wendy had solar dermatitis. Since childhood, anyone who gave her anything sun-related would have it destroyed by her. Except for the sun pendant necklace I'd given her. Before I knew about this, I lowered my head and smiled softly. This wasn't liking him at all. This was clearly treating him like a virus. The hidden meaning was, get the hell away from me. Julian frowned. What are you laughing at? I replied casually. Different strokes for different folks. Good luck with that. Julian was pretty smart. He could sense my indifference. Perhaps feeling my attitude wounded his pride. He said, from now on, I'm going to crush you. Take everything you have, accept your fate. He hesitated, then added, including Wendy. And your first place ranking too. Julian was determined to take it all. He smiled smugly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. As if he could already see my tragic ending, crying miserably. I couldn't even be bothered to look at him. Just picked up my book and brushed past him. Just wait and see. Even if Julian had some cheat codes, so what? Studying was my forte. I'd put in countless hours of effort. I wouldn't be scared by a few words from him. Julian angrily left me with a threat. Just you wait. Before the second monthly exam, the school organized a National Day celebration performance. The National Day celebration was an annual mandatory program at Harbor City's #1 high school. Whether you were a student just entering senior year, or sophomores and juniors, everyone could relax thanks to this event. Usually, this performance had nothing to do with me. Just as Wendy said, I was just a bookworm. I didn't know how to dance. Had no interest in singing. Wendy was the complete opposite. Big performances like this were her stage. She was the final performer. At the peak moment when the whole school's atmosphere was most electric. Wendy stood gracefully under the stage lights. Her figure gentle and beautiful. Her fingertips danced joyfully across the piano keys. Her clear eyes like lake water gazing down at the audience like a goddess. Applause thundered through the auditorium. All of it for this girl. I looked down at the English listening material in my hands. Then lifted my gaze intently toward her on stage. I sat in the front row, able to see all of her In previous years, Wendy had also performed on stage. From elementary through high school, this stage had always belonged to her. Every year before going on stage, Wendy would look at me with fiery eyes and say, "After I finish performing, you have to be the first person to give me flowers." This year was no exception. The melodious piano notes entered their final passage. I smiled softly, picked up the carefully prepared potted bamboo plant beside me, and walked toward backstage. But just as I reached backstage, before I could step inside, I heard Julian's voice. "Wendy, you were so beautiful on stage just now." His voice was enthusiastic and passionate. I lifted a corner of the curtain. Wendy was leaning her entire body against the wall, the darkness behind the backstage seeming to envelop her completely. Julian was now incredibly excited, hugging her, thoughtlessly pulling Wendy into his arms. The lighting was too dim. I couldn't see Wendy's expression clearly. I quietly parted the curtain and walked toward them. This time I could see clearly. Julian was holding a bouquet of sunflowers in his hands. Julian completely failed to notice I'd arrived, just kept confessing to Wendy on his own. Sunflowers symbolize facing the sun. "That day you said I was like the sun, I am the sun." Wendy's features showed clear impatience. Her fingertips kept clenching, looking extremely annoyed. Wendy, with everyone except me, had never had a good temper. Could even be called eccentric. I'd once seen her make a deskmate cry over just one wrong word. Also seen her viciously tear up someone's love letter right in front of them. Wendy was naturally skilled at humiliating guys. I didn't care how Wendy would bully Julian. I was worried this was backstage. Julian's temper wasn't small either. If they argued, it wouldn't be good for Wendy's reputation. So I hurriedly grabbed Wendy's hand, placing the potted bamboo plant I'd prepared on top of hers. My action successfully redirected Wendy's attention. However, Julian got angry, his voice rising sharply. "Ethan, I was here first. Do you have any manners?" I curved my lips into a smile, then moved close to him, using a very low voice to speak into his ear. "Right. Wendy specifically told me to be the first person to give her flowers. Wendy likes me, can't you see? You want to be the third wheel?" Julian ground his teeth, directly grabbing Wendy's wrist and saying, "Wendy, what do you like about Ethan? I can learn it all. Can you like me in the future?" I didn't expect him to be so direct. It stunned me for a second. Wendy's gaze lingered on me, brilliant and intense. After a few minutes, she lowered her eyes and smiled softly. "I like that he's good at studying." This answer was beyond my expectations too. Julian said somewhat impatiently, "You saw it before. I ranked first in the grade. My grades are better than Ethan's." Wendy's beautiful lips curved with a hint of mockery. That was just luck. Wendy really knew how to provoke Julian. Julian ground his teeth. "Fine. I'll always rank first. Then you'll see I'm a million times better than Ethan." Having said that, he shoved the bouquet of sunflowers into Wendy's arms. Wendy cheerfully accepted it, not forgetting to encourage him. "I believe in you. Do your best." Under the lights, Wendy's voice sounded so pure. Her features also carried an enchanting quality. Julian blinked, looking a bit shy, but just as he opened his mouth to say something, Wendy spoke at just the right tempo. "All right. You should go now." This was a direct dismissal. Julian immediately choked on his words. Reluctantly, he could only turn and leave. Before leaving, he stared hard at me one last time. After Julian left, the first thing Wendy did was tentatively reach out to touch my hand. But she didn't dare go too far. She said, "Why haven't you been walking me home these past few days?" Could I say it was because of Julian? Even though I knew the chances of her loving Julian were slim. Even though I felt I didn't like her, I still couldn't help wanting to sulk a little. Wendy and I had known each other for 18 years. She'd been by my side for as long as I could remember. The Sullivan family and the Chen family were close friends. My grandfather and her grandfather had been comrades. My mother and her mother were best friends. So our generation had an especially strong bond. Our parents simply bought mansions right next to each other. Wendy's mother loved to remind me most. "In the future, you must treat Wendy Like your own little sister, and protect her. If she gets bullied at school, I won't forgive you, everyone in both families said. Wendy and I were childhood sweethearts. Even though I hadn't truly fallen in love with Wendy yet, Wendy had truly been flawless toward me. Wendy had always been rebellious. Didn't like listening to her family and often caused trouble. Except for dating early, she'd done everything students shouldn't do. But she was wonderful to me. I wasn't good at making friends. Didn't need to fit into any group. So I easily became a target for bullying at school. And back then, even as a tiny kid, she'd bring makeshift weapons and fiercely protect me from behind. Her mother told me to protect her. But instead it was her protecting me. Pretty miraculous. Middle school was the age of first crushes. I didn't look too bad. So I attracted some immature girls who clung to me. But back then my heart only had room for studying. Not an inch of space for anything else. So I rejected a few troublesome girls, which led to them bullying me at school. Wendy found some of her friends to get revenge for me. Of course, this wasn't anything to be proud of. In the end, Wendy was called home by her mother and made to kneel all night in the ancestral hall. But that night, while kneeling, she still acted cute with me. I just wanted to protect you. Don't feel guilty. Right now I only regret not breaking those bastards' legs. Wendy was like my knight. For as long as I could remember, she'd been standing guard beside me. This was probably also why after she fell for the male lead, I wouldn't accept it, right? Seeing I wasn't reacting, Wendy hurriedly moved closer. What are you spacing out for? I smiled softly, taking steps forward. Let's go. Wendy followed. Her long, narrow eyes couldn't help but smile, placing one hand on my arm, smiling until her eyes curved like crescent moons. Just as Julian had said, he was relentlessly fighting to take everything that belonged to me. Every pop quiz, he had the highest score in class, always able to beat me by just a tiny bit. My deskmate worshipped Julian intensely. He's really amazing. How does he do it? Our pop quizzes are so difficult. You're already getting near perfect scores, and he's still beating you by a little more. I said nothing, just calmly collected the wrong answers from the pop quiz. Julian raised his eyebrows, standing beside me, his tone peculiar as he moved closer. Don't give up just yet. You can see it yourself. Before my strength, you have absolutely no way to fight back, right? Plus, this is already your limit, isn't it? This isn't my limit. That's right, it wasn't his limit. He could get the highest scores without even listening in class. As if he'd already mastered all the knowledge perfectly. My deskmate looked at us like they'd just heard some major news. You guys aren't betting on who can rank first in the grade, are you? Although Ethan is really strong, I feel like Julian is even better. Hearing these words, I wasn't angry. I just lowered my gaze, calmly correcting a wrong answer. Then said, if you're so strong, why do you need to come to me to validate your existence? Just rank first every time, that's all. I lifted my eyes and smiled at him. You're deliberately trying to break down my psychology, aren't you? Because even you aren't sure you can rank first every time, right? I knew Julian had a conquest system. This system would, when starting a conquest, make his scores higher than mine. Just to tell Wendy that Julian was stronger than me. To make her love Julian. This was also considered a shortcut for him. But this also meant, this golden finger wasn't permanent. After he passed the beginner stage, Julian would need Wendy's affection to continuously exchange for this golden finger. That's why he desperately wanted me out of the picture. Dream on. I smiled rather cunningly. Keep dreaming. Julian was provoked by me quite a bit, taking several deep breaths before he could compose himself. I'm just enjoying the feeling of not having to try hard, and still being able to crush you into the mud. Having said that, he left without looking back. Honestly, Julian's cheat function was really quite impressive. But the reason Julian could always beat me was because I hadn't achieved a perfect score yet. If I could get a perfect score, how could he beat me? As long as I was strong enough. Even if Wendy truly fell for Julian later, he still couldn't steal my spotlight. Thinking of this, I smiled faintly and corrected another wrong answer. Wanting to knock me down with such simple words. Julian was simply dreaming. What Julian didn't know was, I was a study fanatic. I studied not actually to chase fame. I just loved the feeling of working through problems. And also on this path, continuously achieving accomplishments. This was probably something he could never understand. He just thought I studied well, only as a means to attract Wendy. Before Julian arrived, I'd always been preparing for the physics competition. Now, the list of students attending the national physics competition had been decided, but because of Julian's arrival, the school had made an exception and given him a spot. Julian didn't disappoint the school either, winning first place nationally right out of the gate, beating me by exactly 1 point. Since transferring and being better than me, Julian had gradually become the god everyone worshipped. Classmates said, Julian was originally a student, guaranteed admission to Princeton. His strength really is solid. Plus I heard, he actively gave up that guaranteed admission before. Now that's what I call a real expert, right? I couldn't say anything. And toward me, many people felt both regret and schadenfreude. Seems like Ethan isn't that strong after all, huh? Being surpassed so easily, that can't feel good. Julian even sleeps in class, and can still easily surpass Ethan. Comparing people just makes you die of frustration. Everyone said I was a fallen god. If I really took it to heart, my psychology would very likely have issues. Then I'd never be able to beat Julian again. Too bad I wouldn't be like that. Julian heard the praise around him, satisfied as he squinted his eyes, not forgetting to glance at me beside him. Really sorry. You got crushed under my foot again. Julian was determined to take it all. However, I didn't care at all and just yawned. You're so amazing. If it were before, Julian would have been angry already. Now he looked behind me, his eyes beginning to sparkle. Wendy. I got first place. I turned to look back. Wendy's gaze fell on me, silent for a few seconds before looking at Julian. Good job. Julian rushed over and grabbed her arm. Praise me more. Don't just brush me off with 2 simple words. Like that, okay? Wendy was silent for a moment, then emotionlessly pulled her arm away, still coldly saying, You know, your current excellence is already putting academic pressure on me. I almost laughed out loud. Wendy was always so sarcastic. Ranking last, what academic pressure? Julian didn't catch Wendy's sarcasm, just looked at Wendy with a face full of expectation. After a long while, Julian's expression changed. He frowned. How? That's not right. It shouldn't be like this. Why is the affection level still at 0? The affection level is still at 0? My mood immediately brightened. Wendy only knew I was happy right now, so she couldn't help but curve her lips up too. She hadn't come to congratulate Julian. She'd come to walk me home. Julian began to visibly panic. He grabbed Wendy's hand. Why don't you like me? You said you like people who study well. So I beat Ethan every single time. You said you like people who aren't noisy. I haven't been bothering you lately either. Tell me, Wendy. Accept me. Let me be your male lead, okay? Julian was very handsome. The kind of dazzling, striking handsome where appearing in front of people would immediately capture everyone's attention. Right now he was like a wounded little animal, humbly begging. Almost no woman could refuse him. Except Wendy wasn't included. Wendy put one hand in her pocket and laughed mockingly. Don't you have a mirror? At least find a puddle to look at yourself. Not far away, there was still a group of classmates standing and watching. Wendy's response was already considered, leaving Julian some dignity. On the way home, I couldn't help but ask her, You don't like Julian? Even though I knew Julian was so strong because he had a system. You couldn't deny. Julian was a very dazzling person. Arrogant and passionate, handsome, and studied well too. When facing Wendy, he'd never been rude with his words. If I were a woman, in a situation where I didn't know Julian's true nature, I'd probably fall for him too. Wendy seemed quite exasperated. Bookworm, do you think I'm stupid or blind? I can see that guy is just completely hollow inside. The reason I was a bit gentle with him before was only because I saw you rarely had an opponent. Thought you might want to play around a bit. How I treated you before. You're not clueless about that, are you? Then Wendy grabbed my sleeve. To even say something like that. Big brother, you're really ungrateful. All the good things I did for you before, you've forgotten in a blink, haven't you? This girl. I kept a straight face, showing I didn't want to acknowledge her. She always said such emotional things at the slightest disagreement, leaving me not knowing how to respond to her. Wendy moved closer to me. That guy has no self-awareness at all. My bookworm is a really good person. Don't get discouraged over temporary setbacks. I believe sooner or later you'll surpass him and take back everything that belongs to you. Wendy's hair seemed to be gilded with a golden glow by the afternoon sun. The girl was full of confidence, brimming with vitality. Wendy's brain didn't seem to work quite right. I was clearly the villainous second male lead, yet she called me a good person. But at the same time I was also Wendy's white moonlight. So this made sense too. I smiled and nodded. Julian was completely anxious. Because he could never conquer Wendy. Because using the golden finger had conditions. Namely Wendy's love. But Julian's current progress in conquering Wendy hadn't increased even a bit. The system would very soon stop providing advantages for him. The next day, as soon as I got to school, Julian dragged me under the stairwell, starting with a barrage of accusations. What's the point? Ethan, you have a system too, don't you? What's your system? Don't hide it. If you've got guts, say it straight. What's the point of playing tricks behind people's backs? He laughed coldly. I was wondering how someone could score so high on their own, and also easily change their fate, with such a good family background too. Hearing his words, the corner of my mouth curved up mockingly. You're just making yourself look like a rabid dog. Julian asked me in a choked voice. If you don't have a system, how do you explain all of this? I can't fail. How can women be so hard to conquer? Before this world, I'd conquered no less than 10 people. Every single one was like a dog. Give them a little something nice and they'd follow. Why is Wendy someone so ignorant? The exception? I said nothing, because I didn't know why either. But I knew. The person Wendy truly liked absolutely could not be someone like Julian. My complete lack of reaction seemed to plunge Julian even deeper into despair. He was convinced I had a system. But then Julian suddenly looked up, his eyes dark as they stared at me. Actually, this is easy to solve. If you just disappeared, wouldn't that be better? I frowned. Before I could react, Julian shoved me. Behind me was the staircase. If I fell, 100 days of injury to bones and tendons was unavoidable. In the emergency, I grabbed Julian's arm tightly. You want to do something evil? Then don't blame me for dragging you down with me. Both our bodies fell backward at the same time, tumbling down several steps. Neither of us could escape. Julian ended up on the bottom, his eyes bulging wide, immediately screaming in pain. Are you sick, you bastard? Ethan, what the hell are you dragging me for? My back hurt so badly I sucked in a sharp breath. I could still stand up. But Julian clearly couldn't. He'd tried several times, his face twisted in bitter agony. I think my leg's broken. I gathered up the books scattered across the floor, gently brushing the dust off their surfaces, waving dismissively at Julian. What does that have to do with me? Julian arrogantly ordered me. Hurry up and take me to the nurse's office, or I'll say you pushed me down. It's already morning self-study time now. There's absolutely no one around. If you don't take me, I'll have to sit here until school's out. If someone sees me, I'll die of embarrassment. I rolled my eyes, pointing to the corner nearby. You just transferred here. You probably don't know there's a camera over there. Julian's face immediately went pale. I left without looking back. Honestly, I really didn't understand why the system chose Julian as the conqueror. Both stupid and ugly. Someone like that could be the male lead. If this world really was a novel, it truly deserved to be abandoned. If I were the author, I probably couldn't write it either. That morning, Julian lay on the floor until morning self-study ended, before classmates finally surrounded him and took him to the nurse's office. When others asked him why he was lying on the floor, he stammered and didn't dare say. Wendy initially didn't care at all. But after hearing me say Julian had tried to push me, she immediately became furious, instantly dragging me to find a teacher. Julian is our school's top-ranked student. He's going to be the committee's star seed in the future. What if something happened to him? I strongly suggest we check the camera footage." Julian kept shaking his head. No. That's not necessary, it's too much trouble for everyone." Wendy's gaze was unfathomably deep, carrying an undeniable authority. "You're such a kind boy. Getting bullied and staying silent. Anyone can see your leg couldn't have fallen by itself. How could it end up like this?" Julian wanted to cry but had no tears. He wanted to say something else. But the principal spoke first. "That's right. I absolutely will not allow something like this to happen on my watch." Julian went pale, could only watch wide-eyed as the principal seriously pulled up the camera footage. Then complete silence. All the teachers present quietly let their gazes rest on me, then rest on him. The camera had no audio, but it clearly showed that he pushed me first. The current top student pushing the former top student. The principal was in a very difficult position. He could only clear his throat lightly, pretending to scold me. "Why didn't you take Julian to the nurse's office?" I said expressionlessly. "He tried to push me down the stairs. If he hadn't brought it on himself, I might be paralyzed from the waist down right now. The fact that I didn't kick him a couple times before leaving is because I'm civilized." What I said made sense, leaving the principal speechless. The principal wanted to turn something big into something small into nothing. Wendy calmly spoke up. "Behavior this serious. Shouldn't there be a disciplinary mark?" Julian looked shocked. "Wendy, do you know what you're saying? You actually want me to get a disciplinary mark? It's because of Ethan, isn't it?" The principal was somewhat troubled. "Students, you're all seniors now. If you get a disciplinary mark, it goes in your permanent record. It'll be a stain for life." Wendy said nothing, just looked at the principal with a cold smile. In the end, the principal still compromised, because the Sullivan family had donated 2 lecture halls to the school, 100 computers, and half the campus grounds. Now, Wendy just wanted justice served. The principal had no reason to refuse. Julian stared at me the entire time. After the principal and teachers left, Julian couldn't help but speak. "Ethan, are you satisfied now? Does it feel good to crush me under your foot?" I was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Honestly, I've never taken you seriously. Crushing an ant. What's pleasurable or not about that?" I truly looked down on Julian. Or more precisely, someone who played dirty tricks like him was definitely destined to fail from the start. Julian was the male lead, and at first he'd encountered the golden carp of heavenly destiny. The heavenly ways said he was the luckiest among countless people, so it chose him. Initially it gave him 2 choices. One was the effort system. 2 was the conquest system. As the name suggested, the effort system meant any effort put in would yield double the return, basically unlocking cheat mode in life. The conquest system meant by conquering the affection of this world's female-led, he could exchange for various golden fingers in the shop. Julian chose the conquest system. After all, the difficulty of conquering one woman was much lower than working hard himself, not wanting to make an effort, just wanting to get something for nothing, and also being able to travel among all these excellent girls in every way. Wouldn't that be absolutely perfect? But Wendy was a tough nut to crack, and Julian felt, since he was chosen by the heavenly way to be the male lead, Wendy should naturally love him. Even in this conquest, Julian hadn't put in much effort at all. From start to finish he'd been unreasonably arrogant, just thinking success should rightfully be his. Where in the world are there such easy wins? Julian couldn't conquer Wendy, and not long after, he showed his true colors. First, the teacher in class called on him to answer questions, and he always stammered without being able to answer. Next were pop quizzes. When his deskmate wanted to cheat off him, he didn't want to share. And when the scores came out, his score was still a long way from passing. On the second monthly exam, his scores dropped even more absurdly, not even reaching 100 points. I was completely opposite to him, with Julian's earlier provocation spurring me on. I loved studying even more. Moreover, I often thought, if next time a conqueror appeared who had both brains and absolute strength, Would I have any way to stand out from the siege through my own will? I was already close to getting perfect scores. Now, after checking for gaps and filling them in, I was infinitely approaching perfection. Now my deskmate's passionate gaze turned back to me. He kept shouting, "Oh my God. Ethan, you're my God." Julian could only make one final struggle, which was before the third monthly exam. Trying every way to sneak into the Sullivan house. He wanted to climb into Wendy's bed. That night, Julian wore gray sweatpants, looking extremely cocky. But Wendy wasn't moved at all. Instead, her face darkened as she threw him out the door. Julian was even photographed by reporters and posted online, losing all face. The next day, Julian's legs couldn't carry him as he searched everywhere. The system in his mouth seemed to have fallen into madness. I opened the original story, only to discover that Julian, this male lead, had somehow become a supporting male character. That's right, this original story had appeared on my bookshelf a year ago. Back then I knew I was the villainous second male lead, and Julian was the male lead of a conquest story. But this book had only been written up to when Julian transferred schools. Everything that happened after was written by me step by step. I calmly put this book back in its original place, accompanied by a mocking laugh. Actually, being a supporting character wasn't so bad. After all, I was still the main character of my own life. Just as I finished speaking, a knock sounded at the door. It was Wendy. She stood in the light holding an umbrella, her other hand holding a bouquet of daisies. "Ethan, from now on, will you wait for me and walk me home every day?" This time she didn't call me a bookworm. I knew she'd liked me for a long time. A young girl's passionate, pure gaze couldn't be faked. I murmured, "But I love studying." Wendy's lips curved into a gentle smile, her gaze tender. "I know I'm nothing special. Other than having some money, I don't have much else. I'm not good at studying and I don't listen well either. But I'm not a bad person. And I'm devoted. Once I've set my sights on you, I just want a happy ending with you. Can you try being with me? As for studying, I think I'm pretty smart. Maybe Mr. Sullivan could consider tutoring me." Outside the door the sunset glowed, and in that moment I heard my own heartbeat. Maybe I'd fallen for her. I just hadn't dared admit it before. Studying was exhausting work, even though I loved it. I had to wake up at 5 every morning. Didn't sleep until 11 or 12 at night. Went through several pens a week, sometimes skipping 2 meals. My top ranking was earned through effort. Everyone either envied or idolized me, thinking I was amazing. Only Wendy would call me a bookworm, while gently worrying if I was tired. I suddenly wanted to hold Wendy's hand, and I did just that. When I took her hand, Wendy, who'd been using casual composure to hide her nervousness, froze completely. She stood still. I smiled softly and said, "If you want to be my girlfriend, then you have to walk the walk. I'm not saying we have to get into the same university, but at least the same city. Can you do that?" The umbrella accidentally fell from her hands to the ground, the still blazing sun in the sky shining on her face. I frowned. "You can't be in the sun." Before I could finish speaking, Wendy had already greedily placed my hand on her face, her entire body radiating vulnerability, like a wronged little stray cat finally finding home. Then shade me from the sun. She clearly wanted me to caress her face. I curved my lips without showing it. Later I got into Stanford. Wendy swore she'd go to the same school. Studied for 2 more years and became my junior. Even later, I returned to school as a successful alumnus to give a speech. Standing on stage, I looked down below, at a sea of young faces full of life. They looked at me with eyes full of expectation and admiration. I said, "In every script there are leading roles and supporting roles. But even if we're dealt the supporting role card, we don't necessarily have to be supporting characters to the male lead. As long as we dare to fight against fate, you'll become the leading role in your own life. No effort is ever wasted. It will be carved into my bones, seep into my heart, making us better than we were the day before." I hope that if you encounter a so-called male lead holding golden fingers, you can also say with all your strength, "You can be the male lead all you want. I can also be a Wendy." Epilogue. Actually, I'd read the original story too. It's just that Ethan, that bookworm, didn't know. And I didn't plan on telling him. When I saw the original story, my first feeling was, did this author write a pile of crap? In this book's outline, in the end I was conquered by Julian. Loved him to death and back. Disgusted by the younger me, who'd always wanted to protect Ethan. But Ethan had never done anything wrong. Ethan didn't like me, because the Sullivan family had fallen on hard times in recent years. And his parents kept telling him he absolutely had to marry me. This bookworm loved studying, felt he could carve out his own bloody path, and just didn't want to rely on me. He kept me hanging, because deep down he liked me, and didn't want to lose me. I knew all of this. If he didn't like me, why would he keep me around? Why not string along someone else? Plus every time I protected him, he'd get so uncomfortable. He really looked like he felt sorry for me. In short, Ethan liked me, and I really liked him. We were childhood sweethearts, destined by fate. Why did we need some hollow Julian inserted between us? That's why I didn't understand what the author was thinking. When Julian came to seduce me, that night he questioned me like a madman. Do you even like Ethan in the end? What's so good about him? He's good everywhere. I'd never seen such a good boy. Maybe it was because the book also said, Ethan was my white moonlight. His soul was irreplaceable, transparent, clean, infinitely beautiful. Ethan himself probably didn't remember clearly. When I was little and my dad locked me in a dark room, it was him who'd find excuses to come borrow my toys. To rescue me, I ranked dead last. Not really because I couldn't learn. I just wanted him to take the initiative to tutor me. I just loved him so much. He'd complain about how hard I had it, while carrying books and running to my house. I suddenly remembered that quiet night. The TV noisy and lively. Him quietly holding his books, looking up at the moon in the sky. Back then I only stared at his silhouette, not paying attention to the moon's shape. Now he'd become my moon. This was the meaning of white moonlight. He was always in the cleanest place in my heart. So someone like that, how could he ever be replaced by some conqueror? The end.